Welcome back to this latest episode, Japan's top business interviews. I'm your host, Greg Story. I'm the president of Dale Carnegie Training Tokyo, Japan. And my special guest today is Darren Morrish, who is the general manager of the Tokyo American Club and a numerous time five-star hotel general manager throughout Asia, including Japan. Darren, welcome to the show.
Excellent. Thanks, Greg. Great to be here.
Well, you're a fellow Aussie, so
yes.
We've got simpatico is working immediately, of course. But, tell us a little bit about your background. You've had numerous leadership experiences dealing throughout Asia, including Japan, and now you're running the Tokyo American Club. That's October last year to 2021, I think that's right, isn't it? So tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. So I guess, primarily my background is in hospitality hotels. So I'm actually a chef by trade. I grew up in the hotel industry with my parents who were buying and selling hotels around Australia. So we moved around a lot. Hospitality sort of got into the blood, and I sort of followed. I was not a great student at school, and so I wanted to really get out and get working as early as I could. That's what sort of helped me move into hospitality, which I chose the chef career to begin with, and then over the years I sort of came out onto the floor and worked my way up through different levels of management with different hotel groups, both in Australia, stints overseas in China, Singapore, Malaysia, and then permanently moving here to Japan sort of in the early 2000s.
And I think you had quite a number of years in Korea as well.
I did, I left out Korea actually. So, but 7 years in Korea in total, which was quite interesting because it's very different to Japan.
And you came from Korea to Japan for the first stint in Japan, or was it the other way around?
No, other way around. So
So you're in Japan. You'd come from where to Japan?
From Sydney.
Sydney to Japan. Okay.
Sydney
so
to
right
Tokyo.
And which hotel were you running?
So I was working with a local Japanese firm, but it was owned by an American fund.
Oh, okay.
So they'd bought this hotel group, which again, it's a very local domestic hotel group, but they have a number of other franchised branded hotels, being Marriott and Sheraton and these sorts of things. So I spent some time here in Tokyo in one of their flagship leased properties, and then moved down to Kobe for a little while at the Sheraton in Kobe, came back to Tokyo, then went back to Osaka, then to Seoul, and then back to Japan in 2018 to open the Pullman Hotel in Tamachi.
Yeah, and congratulations. It's a fabulous hotel.
Yeah, nice little pub.
Yeah, and so, I think about, you've had experience before you got to Japan in terms of leading people. But when you came to Japan that first time we were in your first position, I can't quite remember what position you actually held the first time, but you've got a team, you're running a team. So tell us a bit about what you found. Okay, now I'm in Japan, I've got a Japanese team. Right, this is a little bit different or challenging, or what was the thing that you noticed?
Yeah, it was a cultural shock. I'd had a bit to do with Japan sort of prior to coming to Japan. So I'd put some perceptions in my mind as to what I was stepping into. I always was going to end up permanently probably working in Asia, but Japan actually had been a little bit of an outlier purely because, I guess, the size of the market. I didn't speak the language. So when I arrived, I'd arrived with perceptions, and I came into this fund-owned hotel where I was the only foreigner working in that hotel. And it was different. It was very different to what I'd expected and very different to what I'd experienced in the past.
From a leadership point of view, this is a podcast about leadership in Japan, of course, so I'm going to zero in on that target area. But, I'm an Aussie, and, we've got a certain management style in Australia, which I've grown up in, and then you come to Japan, it's like, whoa, okay, hang on a minute, I've got to make some adjustments here, this is going to work. So what were the things you noticed straight away that, this has worked somewhere else for me, but maybe it's not going to work here. What were some things you realised, I better adjust this, or I've got a bit of a challenge here, how am I going to make this work?
Yeah, probably two things that really stood out. One was obviously the formality, right? Obviously Japan's formality is very different to what we've grown up with in Australia. And secondly was the speed, the speed at which things moved. And
meaning?
Everything,
meaning
from a slower perspective.
Slower speed, right?
Much slower perspective.
Speed could be rapid and they'd be, Japan's fantastic. Or it could be, it's quite slow here, which is a different type of challenge.
Yeah, and of course there's benefits in both. And I think, I was obviously a lot younger when I first arrived, and I was actually very young when I moved into leadership positions back home. And back home, when you were young, if you were eager and had done the right things and been in the right places at the right time, you got given good opportunities, where I'd not experienced that sort of jobs for life sort of thing that I dropped myself into when I first arrived in Japan. So automatically from day one, I had to change some of my management style, because I knew that, pushing through and people still arrive and try and do that today, right? I think that approach doesn't necessarily work well in Japan. But that's what I'd created my success on being previously back home.
Yeah. I remember Heinz Schwander is retired now. He was the GM for the Hilton in Nagoya. And I got to know him when I was living in Nagoya, working in Nagoya, because the hotel was very close to my office. And he'd been GM in a number of big hotels right throughout Asia. And he had that ability. He could look at any job and he could mentally calibrate how that person is performing their job relative to other people in different countries he'd seen doing that job. Right. And he was always frustrated that it wasn't quick enough, it wasn't sharp enough, it wasn't commercial enough, it wasn't businesslike enough. And he was always trying to move it. And I don't know to what extent he succeeded in doing that. I mean, it was a very well-run hotel, of course. But how about you? Were you able to do that too? You had many experiences throughout Asia before you got to Japan, and you had experience with people doing exactly the same jobs and doing them in exactly, well, not exactly, but different ways perhaps. So what were some of the contrasts that struck you?
Yeah, so again, going back to those two key points, I think, Asia is a very wide, big, complex place. And interestingly, a lot of people think that Asia is all one place. But, often when you have had the luxury of being able to work in a number of those different places, you do see that the culture, for example, comparing back to home, Australia is very mixed culture. So you kind of take it as it comes. Whereas when I came to Japan, it was more about the conformity, about following what everybody else was doing, because that's the way it had always been done. So when I arrived in Japan, absolutely, same thing. Hospitality is hospitality. You can walk around and you can look and you can identify, and then you start to benchmark and go, okay, is there opportunity here, and all these sorts of things. And in hospitality, what I found when I came to Japan was that the basic level of service was very high, right? Because it's part of the culture of that.
Polite society, care for people.
Absolutely.
Customers is really a God type of idea, is implanted into everyone's head, right?
Yeah. But where I guess it gets perhaps a little muddied or lost was that the speed and efficiency thing was never a consideration. Now, when you arrive in Japan with a culture of, politeness and great service as a basic level, to be working for an American fund that only looks at it as a bricks and mortar, what's my return, they collided quite often. And different ways of thinking and different expectations, I guess, was what I needed to change and navigate and try new things, whilst being respectful of the fact that, we're in another country. There's 127 million Japanese and about 1 million foreigners at that time. We're still very much a minority. So barging your way through with the dozer is not necessarily going to work. So I had to adjust my style.
And what was the actual adjustment you made? Was it through your expectations got adjusted? Was it your communication style got adjusted? What was the thing you had to adjust?
Yeah, a bit of everything, I think. Again, what I find with Japan, in leadership roles in Japan, is that, we all come perhaps, and we've been here a long time, right? But when you first arrive here, you have expectations about what Japan might be like, or what the management styles are like. And you may have heard, leadership is about that, one direction, top-down, militaristic style. And I think a lot of that still exists in certain companies within Japan. However,
especially smaller companies, owner companies.
Absolutely.
Like it is the shacho, the president, is really, his word is law.
Right.
And everyone just snaps into line and salutes and follows orders.
Right. Yeah. And again, touching back on Korea, that is another level again. I mean, most people have a perception that Korea is perhaps a little bit more fast moving and a bit more dynamic than what Japan is. But I was again quite shocked by how different it was to Japan.
So less dynamic, less fast moving.
On the surface, it appears very dynamic, but within the organisational structure and how that functions, especially from a leadership style, it is very much top down. And hierarchy and direction from the shacho or the boss is the only way forward. Meaning that you're out, 3 or 4 nights a week drinking till 4 o'clock in the morning because he has told you to come. And those days are kind of gone in Japan. But they're still very heavily ingrained in Korea. So coming back to your point about how I changed, thankfully within my job you get to move around a lot. In hotels you have the opportunity to move around a lot, so it becomes part of your practice of understanding that you do need to change yourself. And every role that I've been in, I guess from a very young age, of being a leader of a kitchen team, when my executive chef walked out,
right,
it was, you're in the deep end of the pool and somebody has to stand up and take...
battlefield promotion to head chef.
Yeah, exactly. But that said, all of those experiences is what builds, I think, on the leadership style that you have and your adaptability to the situation that you get put into. One size doesn't fit all. We know that. And yet, funnily enough, people still think that works, right? And you go from one place to the other, taking things that have made you successful. But I don't think I've ever worked anywhere where I didn't take something away and adjust my leadership style, because there is an opportunity everywhere you go. It's what you do with that opportunity, and you learn from everybody, good or bad. And that's sort of the approach that I took with when I arrived in Japan. My parents, when I was being brought up, I was always taught to be courteous to other people, especially when you're in another country. You are a guest in their country. So, 2 eyes, 1 mouth, 2 ears, 1 mouth, observe, adjust. And as you know, the culture of businesses in Japan is very deep and very long.
And so things did you find that you'd seen work elsewhere that perhaps Japan could have benefited from making some adjustments to be more like that, where you've seen success? Were you able to find things you could bring in that maybe people who've grown up in basically it's not exact perfectly monoculture, because there's lots of Koreans living here who come here, parents came here during the war as labourers, etc. And so you've got that, and you've got a big Chinese student population here and a lot of Vietnamese working in factories. So it's not exactly a monoculture, but it's pretty close to a monoculture as far as most business runs. So were there things that you'd seen work elsewhere that you could actually help people to do their jobs in a better way? They wouldn't understand. It's like the frog in the well, they say in Japanese, doesn't know the ocean, But you've seen the ocean, and they haven't seen the ocean. They're still in the well. Were there things you could find that help them do their jobs better, that improve business you could actually apply from elsewhere? Yeah,
I think so. Again, I think you've got to use the strengths of the current style or the ways that they were working, and again, that monoculture of nobody, the creativity part, and people stepping out beyond what they knew or what about the well, right? So what I tried to do, or what I think I identified relatively quickly, was, in more Western settings, is that people sort of put their hands up and want to stand out a little bit more. In Japan, we know that's the opposite, right? So what I sort of found that was my leadership style changed to try and pull people, you still can see the talent. You can identify it most times. Language or not, you can see it just in the behaviour and how they go about what they do. So I adjusted my style to try and identify that even more so, and then spend more time with those people to let them become the people that go out and actually do the work or the impact that you want to have during that business. I found that worked in Japan. It worked also in Korea, a bit more hierarchical, of course, but that was not my way of working in the past. I was very much focused on outcome, results. But when I arrived in Japan, my leadership style from success that I had before was accentuated by the teamwork part of how people operate in a team in Japan. I'd seen it, but never seen the value of it. So I tried
When was the first occasion you sort of actually realised the power of Japanese teamwork?
Oh, God, I think probably in the first week I was here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was very quick. Just in the fact that in the hotel that I was working in at the time, it was very unusual to me. In hotels, generally people book in advance, and you know when you go home at night that you're going to finish on, somewhere around X% of occupancy. When I arrived in Japan, first week I was in the hotel, and I was going home and the hotel was at 15% occupancy, thinking, well, this isn't going to work. And coming back the next morning and realising that we'd closed at 80. So we just had a huge amount of
people just came in,
just walking off the street, and the train culture, right? Of miss the last train, out drinking, and all of a sudden people would walk in off the street. Now, somehow through teamwork of limited amount of people within that operation, because it was
because you can't predict.
You can't, but it was a pattern, right? And they knew that, so they would do different things at different times, knowing that every day during the week. We would go home at 15% at 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night, and the next morning you'd come in, you'd picked up 70 points in occupancy, which is unheard of in other places where I'd worked. And the teamwork part of how that happened is the thing that I recognised the following morning. In that with limited resources, but a group of people working together with good structure, sometimes too fixed structure. It showed me that teamwork is so important in this country, and they all lift to raise all at the same time, as opposed to individually, I can do it, leave me to it.
Right.
That resonated with me very early. And I say the first week, but it was certainly within the first month that I saw that, which you don't get in Western culture generally. It's, you have a mix of people that actually will be out the back and don't want to deal with that wave of business that's coming in. So the teamwork part is also something that I've taken away and changed my leadership style as to how I work with a team of people to take them on a journey. Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? I just think about teamwork in hotels. I've got a couple of good stories about that. One was I was going to the Ritz-Carlton School in Washington, D.C. for a week to study about the customer service. I was working at Shinsei Bank at the time, and I checked into one hotel, Tyson's Corner, but actually I wanted to be in the DC property because it was closer to where their headquarters was. Didn't want to commute that far every day. So when I was checking in, I said, look, when I booked, there was no vacancy in the DC property. I don't need vacancies. Oh, yes, sir. Well, can I get in that property? Yeah, no problem. So I take the bags back downstairs to the taxi deck, and the young guy says, okay, he's loading the bags. And where are you going? Oh, I'm going to your DC property. Right, got it. Boom, get in the cab, go off. I get to the other end, a guy, takes the bags out of the car, welcome to the Ritz-Carlton. Doctor's story. Hang on a minute. What's going on here? And then I'm a bit shocked. So I'm walking into the hotel, and this young guy, big young guy, huge doors, massive door. When he opens the door, welcome to the Ritz-Carlton, Dr. Story. And then I'm going up to the check-in, and this young blonde American woman comes out from behind the counter and greets me and checks me, and I go, wow, that's very impressive. And I heard a story the other day. I think it was I might have this wrong, I think it was the Regent Group. An Australian CEO had stayed there, and 20 years later, this is in the States, he came back to that hotel. And when he was checking in, the woman who was checking him in said, welcome back to the Regent Hotel, sir. And she hadn't been doing any searching on the keyboard. He noticed that, he's sharp enough, he realised, he said, well, hang on a minute, what's going on here? How come you know? I wasn't here for 20 years, and you weren't here 20 years ago. How on earth do you know I was here before? So a trade secret, can't tell you. He said, look, you got to tell me. So he finally extracted information from it, but apparently to a teamwork. The guy who took his bag out of the cab asked him if it was his first time here. He said, no, I've been here before. And he tugged on his right ear. And she saw that, and she knew, oh, he's been here before.
Right.
How expensive is that? Tugging on the right, what does that cost?
Yeah.
But the teamwork, that they had worked out, no, it's completely analog system to work out how to recognise guests. I thought there were a couple of terrific stories about the power of remembering people, name, service, this type of thing. It's quite impressive. Anyway, I digress simply because I think they're two great stories of teamwork and culture in terms of client service. So anyway, please go on. So,
if I may, I mean that in itself, and again in hospitality to me is very simple, right? People want to be recognised, right? And again, it's been proven time and time again. You can have a brand new hotel, club, whatever it may be, but how, again, it's not about the experience of what the room's like. That's part of it, right? What people remember is how you make them feel, right? And that's hospitality. So, even here in the club, people come and it's all transactional, and that's one thing about Japan, which actually can become a bit of a challenge in leadership, because they want you to tell them everything to say. They want you to show them the way to do everything. And generally, which is a wonderful part of the country, is that trains run on time. It's very efficient from that perspective. But when you want to add a bit of that personal hospitality touch, that becomes actually quite a challenge, to individuals, because it's more about that conformity.
So it's the American "have a nice day," which became a sort of cliche for bad service,
right?
Because it's done to everybody. There's no personalisation.
Right.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, I get it. So thinking about other areas in your leadership journey when you first started to realise the power of teamwork, what did you find worked well in your different manifestations in Japan? Because you've been in a number of different jobs in Japan, but one of the things is, you come in, you're the new boss, or you're running a new section, you're trying to get people engaged, you're trying to get them on the journey. You've got an idea in mind about where we need to be, and let's all head in that direction. So what have you found has been effective in Japan for getting people engaged and getting behind you?
So I think, first and foremost, I follow a similar pattern for many, many years. Whenever I go somewhere new, I literally spend the first couple of months just observing and watching and looking for repetitive things that are happening on a regular basis, right?
These are good and bad things.
Yeah, good and bad, and somewhere in between, right? And then I start to create and form, I guess, what I think is what I would like to have implemented into the organisation. Then working backwards, thinking, okay, how does that team work, especially within, here's a little bit different at the club because we have quite a mixture of different cultures, which again is another, complexity to it. In going back to your question about working with Japanese teams, what I found was incredibly successful was that the quieter you were the first couple of months, the more engagement you got in month 3.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and
why do you think that is?
Well, because I think what happens is, sometimes there can be a bit of a transitional, rotating, rolling door. People sort of come in and people operate and have different management styles. People have different interests in the culture, the country itself. And again, in hospitality, we can be picked up and dropped in different places at all different times. So sometimes you don't get the 2 months to sit there and say, okay, let's observe. But specifically for Japan, which that is uncommon, to be picked up and dropped around so much, I've found that being not necessarily in the trenches, but certainly spending more time out listening and building a personal relationship with the Japanese, when you then start to talk about what it is that you want to implement or a vision or what it is that you want to take the organisation to, I've always found that that's given me a much better base to start with, as opposed to just coming in and say, guess what, guys, everything changes on Monday.
Yeah, well, your predecessor, Tony, was here for how many years?
9 years.
9 years, one GM for 9 years, so no change.
Yep.
And a lot of the staff have been here quite a long time
Yes.
too. If I look in the club, there's quite a lot of stability in the team. And then, bingo, you turn up, so they haven't had much change in 9 years.
Right. And look, there's good and bad in that, I think, right? Again, within the culture of the way Japanese generally work, they are looking for job stability. They still do that, from the day they enter the job. The new intakes and these sorts of things, they're looking for those things. It's changing slightly, but, cultural shift doesn't happen in one generation. And I think sometimes we forget that, right? Especially as Australians. I mean, our country is very old, as how we know it today is very young, whereas Japan is, thousands of years old with ingrained culture that half the time they don't even know their they're behaving the way they're behaving because it's just part of what they do. But if we come into the country thinking that, oh, well, it's not the way it should be done, well, good luck with changing it, right? You're going to run into a lot of brick walls. And I guess one of the other things which is very different with Japan, especially from a leadership thing, is that you often can be lulled into this sense of things are changing, but actually they're not, because there's silence. And you assume that silence is actually, oh, everybody understands. So, I kind of picked that up also very quickly, and without pushing people into uncomfortable zones of saying, do you understand and do you have any questions? You and I know there won't be any questions.
There won't be any questions, exactly right.
So understand that and then think about a different way of trying to drag out what it is that could be a complication. So again, in different parts of Asia, but again, coming back specifically to Japan, I've found that you need to spend a lot more time doing that than you probably do in other countries. Again,
it's always exciting, isn't it? You think, you've got the thing you want to happen out there. Everyone knows about it.
Everyone's nodding.
You think it's going to happen, and then you find out it hasn't happened. It's like, what? But this is your assumption that people understood, or assumption that people cared, or assumption that people accepted doing whatever you think is important, because sometimes lead you astray. So in terms of other things, you're in month 3 now, I guess, as you talk in month 3. But in your previous manifestations here, where you've gone through that month 3 part and you've been doing the listening, and then you start to work on things, what did you find worked for you in terms of at that point, having listened, having watched, having studied, now you're ready to do things? How did you go about, okay, I know what I want to have happen now. How did you get people to get behind you and do that?
Yeah, so I think, everybody says communication, right? But communication, you can stand there and talk as much as you like. If they don't understand why, or the details of what it is that you're trying to implement or change, then Japan's a very hard nut to crack. So what I've found has worked in the past is that, I'll start with a template. And my vision is always a template. And I continue to cut off a few edges and shine up a few corners or whatever it may be, to then make the people feel connected to what it is that I'm trying to do. And I spend a lot of time trying to understand or make sure that they understand what I'm asking them to do.
So that template, what's in the template?
Well, just in relation to creating a vision, right? So around, what it is that I think I can add value to the business, because essentially I'm one person of a team of, here, for example, 400, right?
You're running a big shop here, aren't you?
Yeah, running a big shop. So, but it's a numbers game. So if I can get 50% of them to understand that it will take them as well as the business to a better place, you're halfway there, right? And then often, as I'm sure you've probably seen or heard in other cases, is that tides move quite quickly. It takes it a long time to potentially to get to here, but then it becomes a tsunami quite fast. And the patience part of getting it to that, using that template, using that vision, getting people engaged in what's going on, getting them to take ownership in what it is that without consequences. I think, consequences are not necessarily the right outcome. Sometimes they're necessary, but getting them to take more ownership and accountability for what they contribute to, as opposed to just coming to work and doing a job, which, you'll always have those. It's the bigger the team, the bigger the chance you'll have those type of people. But again, telling a story, I think it's become so much more about storytelling, and creating. I think one thing with Japanese is that if you give them a story that they believe in, they'll always follow. Right? And I think that whole conformity thing about how Japan works, I think confirms that, in that, often people get up and do what they do because they've always done it, because nobody's told them to do it any way
That's the
different.
accepted way, and we follow the path.
Yeah. And again, I always try and be very mindful of culture and how people will react to it. And again, I don't think there's ever been a role that I've been in that I've sort of said after 2 months or 3 months, here's the plan, nothing changes.
Right.
Because that's a hard sell quite often, because a lot of the businesses are very fixed in their way of working, and the business has, pre-COVID, been incredibly stable, growing at a great rate of knots. COVID has had a completely different perspective on it now. You know, and you look at the way hospitality is working in Japan now, it's a real shake-up for it. It'll be interesting to see how it comes out the other end.
If you want to be successful as a leader, do the Leadership Training for Managers course. All companies need people who can both manage and lead. Leading people screams out for real skills in communication, dealing with all different types of people, being excellent at innovation, planning, delegation, handling mistakes, doing performance reviews really well, and inspiring and motivating the team. Do the Leadership Training for Managers course now in either Japanese or English. Are you doing business with Japan? Do you really know how things work? Japan Business Mastery provides the answers. Do you have the right networks and know how to create them? Do you know how to get on the same wavelength with Japanese buyers? Do you know what being trustworthy looks like from the Japanese perspective? Japan Business Mastery is based on more than 30 years' experience in Japan and will become your go-to guide. Want to succeed in Japan? Buy Japan Business Mastery now. One of the aspects of getting creativity from teams in their respective roles is engagement. If people are not engaged, they don't care. But once you've got that engagement, then people can start thinking about, okay, I feel some ownership here. I want to do better. I want the organisation to do better. I've got a creative idea, or I've got an insight, or I've got some project I think we should start, or something like that. Assuming you've got that creativity, what have you seen works well in getting people to be creative? I mean, amongst your many roles you had in Japan, in different hotels, etc., what have you seen works that gets creativity from people?
Again, it's the opposite of that conformity. So it tends to be, you know, because again, as we said earlier, right, you can stand in a room with 300 people and say any questions, and you know you're not going to get any. So the smaller the group, I found, the more questions you would get. Right? And again, I would just keep trimming down till you start to sort of see that tipping point of where people are actually a little bit more brave. You know, they're still looking around the room for reactions, but you certainly get more questions than what you would with 10 people in a room. And each organisation is slightly different. You know, age of people, how long they've been there working in that organisation, how long the organisation has existed in itself. So, you know, in Japan, I've always found that less is more. And then gradually, you know, you bring somebody else in. So it goes from a group of 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 and just keep building on it from that perspective. But I always try, when we're talking about implementing something new, to be a person who's supporting this person who has decided to be engaged in it. Not necessarily I'm carrying the bag of tools to make it happen. This is something that this person believes in. You believe in them. So it builds that momentum of getting more people on board, not necessarily just with my idea. And look, you know, I learn from everybody as well. You know, you learn different things and you learn different ways of doing things. And I think the key to any leadership style is about continual improvement and continual change and continuing to try new things. Because and even in Japan, right? I mean, it is changing. It changes very slow, but it is changing. I think, you know, if you and I look back at when we first arrived in Japan compared to what it is today.
Yeah, I got here 79, 1st of April 1979, you know, unrecognisable compared to where it is today. Tokyo's an amazing city today.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
So just in that sense of, you know, individual creativity, like, first of all, you've got to care, and then to have the thought that, well, maybe we could do this better, and then have the sense of trust that you can put an idea up and that it'll be accepted. So often in Japan, people are shy to speak up because they're worried about being judged. maybe their communication isn't good enough. People could think they're a hopeless speaker, or maybe their idea is rubbish and people are going to laugh at their idea, or people get jealous. Who are you to be putting up ideas? You know, there's a whole lot of things holding people down actually in the culture to basically circumvent coming up with creative ideas. So how do you encourage them? How do you get that esprit de corps in the group to be free to come up with ideas and be encouraged? And how do you communicate that and project it to people so they believe it, as opposed to this is just, you know, the boss shooting hot air here, and actually it's only superficial, it's not real. How do you get past that?
Yeah, sure, good question. I think, you know, humans are humans and we like to relate to things that we can relate to. So again, another thing that I've often done, if you look at creativity of the Japanese in general, I mean, there's some incredibly creative people. Yeah, and they're all there, right? They are there. And they often stand out because they are the people that are different to the norm. You know, there's some incredible success stories with leadership, creativity and things across all of Japan. So often being in Japan, island country, island nation, I'll often refer to, you know, Japanese success stories, right? That they can relate to. You know, and let's just take Toyota as an example, right?
Good example.
Right. I mean, what a success story, right?
Amazing company.
And the amount of, you know, people that are connected to Toyota in some way or form, they can relate to it. So if you can pick something that is relevant to what it is that you're trying to do, and we're not building Toyota, right?
No.
We're building something very different, but there could be something. You know, what is it? A cafe? Is it a? There's good examples of Japanese hotels that do hospitality incredibly well. So relate to something that they can relate to. If I talk about something in Australia and they've never been to Australia, what does it mean? So therefore then the engagement and the belief, I think, is very hard to sway. So again, storytelling to try and find a nerve that hooks them in and then gain that momentum to then start to shift the boat into the direction that you believe is right. And sometimes it might not be, but again, keep adjusting it. And again, I think that's where the benefit of teamwork in Japan, if you have a vision and you create that engagement and that belief in where you're leading them to, they will follow like nowhere else. I mean, in Western country, you're fighting with people every day about your direction or whatever it is that you want to do.
5 Aussies together and you've got 8 opinions. Right?
Exactly.
A little bit different management task there.
Yeah.
In terms of actual brainstorming, have you come across any particular methodologies that work well in terms of, you know, formal brainstorming, getting ideas out on the table?
So one thing that I do, again, hospitality it's available all over the world. It's available in every street you go to, wherever you are. What I often do when we talk about service-related things is I'll get a group of people in a room, could be 6, could be 3, could be 10, right, and actually get them to talk about experiences that they remember.
Or as a service...
this part, right? So I heard this story, or I stayed in a hotel and, you know, welcome back, or whatever it may be. These little things that often don't get put into a book, which, you know, in Japanese leadership is very common. Here's the manual, follow it, do it exactly the same, right? And there's benefits in that, but it doesn't add that individual experience, right? So from a hospitality or service perspective, I try to get them to, again, share stories about what made them feel good and how could you implement that into our organisation, for example. And again, you know, it's a bit like I started late with parenting, right? And my son's 13, and it's like this constant thing about, you know, just try one thing new every day. And I find that it's a similar sort of format in a lot of cases with very established Japanese organisations, because they have come through the organisation with a manual, and creativity and thinking outside the box was not the normal. So when a foreigner comes in and says, oh, you need to think differently, left field, right field, blah, 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 it's all very foreign to them. So I try and, again, link back to something that they can
identify with.
Correct.
You know, it's interesting, again, another Ritz-Carlton story. Rico de Blanc, who unfortunately passed away very, very young, he was the GM who opened the Ritz-Carlton in Osaka, and I was working in Osaka. And he tells a story of a cleaning lady. She was polishing some lamps or something. And two rather older Japanese ladies were walking along the corridor in the hotel, and she overheard one say to the other, "Oh, it's your birthday today, let's have lunch here." And so she heard that, and they kept on going. So she put down whatever she was doing, and at a discreet distance she followed, and she observed which restaurant they went to. This is very interesting. And you think about the hierarchy of hotels, right? She went into the kitchen. She's a clean lady. She went into the kitchen. She told the head chef that these two ladies on this particular table, one of them, that one there, has a birthday. Went back, cleaning again. So at the end of the lunch, little petite, cake and one candle comes out, just unexpectedly. Astounded, absolutely astounded. So the lady goes back home and she's telling her husband, "You can't believe what happened today." And the husband says, "Right, fantastic service, right, all of our guests from now on, we're going to put them up at the Ritz-Carlton." The family name was Takeda.
Right.
There's a big pharma company here called Takeda. That's Mr. and Mrs. Takeda. So that cleaning lady, and when I went to that Ritz-Carlton course in Washington, I asked them about this. How do you, because they're not well known for being big payers of salaries. They're not laying on the money to get that level of quality of commitment and service. I said, "Well, how did you do that? How did you get that person to know my name when I got out of the cab when I arrived here? And how did you get that cleaning lady to do it?" And they said, "We don't overpay people. It's ladies and gentlemen serving. Ladies and gentlemen is their line, right?
Yeah.
And they treat their people like that. With Disney, they're all what do they say in Disney? They're all on stage, or they're all actors in the whole play or whatever. How they treat it, it's a culture. So, what have you found works well in terms of building a strong culture? That type of very strong service culture. I mean, you talked before about Japan has got very high levels of service. And I'm probably, because I've been here, it was my 37th year this year, right? So I'm probably a bit spoiled. But I often feel it's a very good service, but it's rather impersonal. You can go to the same konbini, or when I worked in Osaka, there was a Subway store at the bottom of the first floor to go down there sometimes buy lunch. And I go there quite often, every day, irashaimase, arigatou gozaimashita. It was all manual, right? There was no, "Oh, good to see you again, how's your day been? Would you like the same thing you had yesterday?" Always had the same thing, very boring guy. There was none of that interaction,
Right?
Because it just wasn't in the system. And I always thought about that. I thought, and I'd engage them, I'd get frustrated, so I'd start engaging them. So you've got this very polite culture, you've got this very caring culture to a certain point. But that personalisation, that culture of getting people to really connect as human beings one-on-one, which I think we have in Australia. You go to restaurants in Australia, they don't get tips. They're not overly paid either.
No.
But they're the sorts of people who like people.
Yeah.
And they want to engage with you because they're looking for some sort of human connection from their side, which you don't really get here too much.
No.
So, we went to Elio's the other day, and I talked about, as a restaurant has that here for me, which is why I keep going back there since 2001 when I discovered it when I came back to Tokyo. So how do you go about building that culture?
Yeah, that's a great observation, something that I noticed as well. When I first arrived in Japan, you go to McDonald's, to Starbucks, to whatever it is, the actual level of service is very high to begin with, but it's monotone, as you say. It's da-da-da-da-da, tick, 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 thank you very much, next, And again, culturally, if we look at, hospitality is not new to Japan, but our way of looking at hospitality is different to Japan. And culturally, when you think about managers and other leaders within your organisation that are or have come through exactly the same format, behaviour creates behaviour. I'm a big believer in that, right? So the opposite side of that is that, as you mentioned, the lunch we had the other day, there are restaurants and examples of bars and whatever it may be that you can see the Japanese can do it, right? but again, because of that culture within the company, it's not there. You have to continue to keep chipping away, and finding examples that you can, again, share with the team members to say that, if you do this, you're not going to get in trouble.
No.
Right? And in a lot of cases, I think it's more about, it's risk adverse, right? They don't want to do it because they think they're going to get in trouble. And in some cases they may. But in hospitality, as you say, it's about connectivity between people. And, until the day we're sitting in a restaurant with a robot delivering food to our table, which I don't know how many people are going to enjoy that
experience,
right? Starting at the top in this sort of hierarchical structures is very important, because I can say it, but if the people below me don't believe in it and don't think that it's necessary, then it's going to be a very, very long game. And either I'll get impatient and leave, or I'll get impatient and leave.
Well, another shocking story. One of my previous employees, we still friends, so we keep in touch, and every year, this is actually a tie. She gave me this tie for Christmas, for my birthday, and I give her something every year in exchange. And so it was time to go and buy her present. So my wife and I went to Takashimaya, and we buy the gift. She loves golf, so we found a golf outfit for her. Anyway, so we're doing shopping. My wife's looking around, and she went into one of those in-department boutiques inside the department store. And she had bought an item there quite a long time ago, 3-4 years ago, right? And the lady said, "Oh, Chiaki-san, good to see you again. Oh, I noticed you've changed your hair." Unbelievable. She remembered her personal name. Like, my name's Story is quite unusual for Japanese, so maybe Monogatari can remember that, right? But to remember her personal name, to remember what she bought last time, and to remember had she changed her hair length. She was just bewildered by that. I was bewildered by that too. But that's a Japanese example, and I don't think there's any manual for that.
No. No.
So that lady, as a service provider, is operating at genius levels of service, and this is in Takashimaya, a very conservative, long-term Japanese department store. And she was a little bit older lady, I guess maybe 50s. I'm Japanese, you can't tell how old they are, but I'm guessing probably a little bit 50s maybe. 40s, 50s, and she could do that. And I thought, wow, that's impressive. Yeah. That's really impressive.
It's a great story, right? These are the exact. So where do you go now to buy the next present?
Yeah, well, bingo.
It's.
My wife said to me that if ever we move home, and we're getting older and we're not so mobile anymore, she wants an apartment right next to the Takashimaya.
Right.
When Takashimaya starts building apartments, she'll probably want to buy one of those. Yeah. But thinking about, a lot of things we've talked about so far revolve around trust, You're talking about the small group, slightly larger, and then having people believe in what you're saying. That's a trust issue, and culture is a trust issue too. So what have you found works well in your travels in Japan and building trust in organisations?
That's a tough one, right? Because again, sometimes we interpret what we think is right or what is happening, and perhaps sometimes we've been shocked to realise that that's not in fact what it was. Unlike you, unfortunately, my Japanese is not good enough to understand, the intricacies of the conversations behind what's going on. But the longer you stay in one place, the more you pick up body language, right? And what I've found in my time in Japan is that I've become incredibly good at picking up body language signs from people who are having good days, bad days, or otherwise. And trust becomes a part of that. We all react differently to the way we feel when we talk to somebody, the way we look, the looks on our face. I've become very, very in tune, whatever the correct word is. Not sure, but in tune to that. And again, because I don't speak the language, I find that I rely on that more to identify and look and see, read the room. And again, going back to your thing about people remembering names, I'm actually not very good at it. But what I've found is that it's all about that split second of time when you're introduced to somebody, that if you are seriously listening and you're completely focused on that one thing, the name comes back at the most bizarre times. But if there's something just even vaguely in the back of your mind that's distracting you, this is Greg, this is Mike. You can't remember Mike. So again,
Straight to the Meishi.
Straight to the Meishi, right? And you're thinking, going, how can I remember this
At least
name?
in Japan you got the Meishi, right? Everywhere else you got a problem, right?
That's right. That's right. So, going back to your thing about trust, again, if you can remember people's names and address people by name, it's amazing how much trust that builds. Yeah. Because humans as humans want to hear their own name and be recognised for who they are.
And you've got 400 people here.
Right.
So how do you, in previous works, I'm sure you had big teams as well, hundreds of people.
Yep.
Were you able to remember every single person's
Definitely
name?
not. No. I'd be lying to you if I said I would. And again, in an organisation as such, there's probably 20 to 30 of them that you actually might see on a regular basis, and others you might not. Now, often people go, well, why do you have name tags? Well, it's so the general manager can remember their names when he passes them in the hall, right? Often, sometimes if you don't know the person, you will take a glance at the name tag, but the difference that it makes, even if they notice that you're looking at your name tag and you call them by name, that starts to build trust. And again, linking in that storytelling and how are you and how can I help you do what you do better, and listening to everybody, because in any organisation, everybody plays a part. Somebody, it doesn't mean that the GM has to be the only leader, right? And I think once you get more leaders within your organisation all working in the right direction, the result's going to be a lot closer to what you think you'll want it to be. Whereas if, one approach and this is my style and this is the way it's going to work, I've never seen that work in Japan. I've never seen it work in Japan. And again, storytelling, groups, smaller groups, bigger groups, builds that trust. And again, I think the longer you have been in Japan, it actually gives you more kudos, because you've actually, people check, right? And they check where you've been and what the reputation was and all that sort of thing. So you've got to be very mindful and careful of that in Japan, because trust is a very big thing. Yeah.
And so if we think about someone who's going to be sent to Japan, their next posting is Japan, okay, and usually they're given instructions on expectations of what you've got to do while you're there, and it's usually improve it, right? Yeah. It's not like you don't get told, okay, Darren, you're going to run the Turkey American Club. Steady as she goes, don't change anything, just keep it as going, it's fine. Don't expect innovations, don't expect any improvements, just keep it as going. No one ever gets that instruction. It's always, we want more, better, faster with less, right? That's the usual thing. So they're coming in with an agenda from their headquarters, and they arrive here. So what would be some piece of advice you'd give someone, because you've been here a long time, I've been here a long time, and the reason I do this podcast is so that people don't have to get here and work it out for themselves. They can listen to I think today is the 100th episode today. Congratulations.
Oh, wow.
Number 100, yeah.
Excellent.
I don't know if it'll actually go out in that order,
right,
but it's the 100th episode today. So we've got 100 episodes. There's a wealth of knowledge in 100 episodes on leading in Japan. And if you listen to all of these episodes and watched all these episodes, you'd be so much better tuned up before you even get on the plane than trying to turn up here and work it out by yourself. But for those people who are going to be coming here to run an organisation with Japanese colleagues, what would be some piece of advice you'd give them? Yeah,
first one would be patience. Patience. I mean, Japan is probably not going to be what you think it is, because again, Japan, as we all know, after during the bubble and the growth, and everybody knows the names, and they pin some sort of expectation on what that means to them. But what it is outside of Japan could be something completely different.
What do you mean by that? The names? What do you mean?
So if you think about, we mentioned Toyota. If you think of any of the automobile companies, right, or you think about electronic goods.
Do you think brand names?
Brand names, things that people have been exposed to before. Their experience of how it's sold in where they're coming from could be very different to the way it works here, right? So come with some expectations, but be prepared for them to not be what you thought they were going to be. And with that becomes patience. Again, the culture is a couple of thousand years old, 5,000 years old, not sure. Things don't change quickly, but the culture and the depth of the culture in organisations in Japan is greater than I've seen anywhere else. Going back to your comment about the monotype or the the pasteurized sort of style. So be prepared to see things you've not seen before. And the way people work is so that patients think about the frustration of trying to drag things out of people. You're going to become very frustrated very quickly. The second thing would be, again, linking into culture, is get involved in the culture. Get involved in what's happening, within and around you at a particular time. Get with the people, right? Again, whilst it's hierarchical, it's not uncommon for the boss to be out, with the staff, which in Western culture generally is frowned upon. Here, it's a very important part of building that trust.
You're talking about after hours.
After hours stuff. And again, I think it's dwindling. It's dying away.
It's going away, isn't it? Yeah.
It is going away. Not sure what impact COVID has had on that. But, again, people are people. I mean, you look at what it's like now with people not being able to go out and have drinks and meet with their friends. It's a big part of the culture. Whereas, that was one thing that was a bit confrontational to me when I first arrived, was because I was always told you don't. Yeah. Right?
That's the Aussie.
You don't go
Work,
out. Yep.
Non-work.
Yep.
Separation.
Separate them, right?
5 o'clock or 6 o'clock. That's it. Yeah.
So, you still got to have your wits about you and be sensible. But it's a big part of that building trust in Japan. Don't be disappointed if you go out and then they send you home and they go on to the next party, right?
Actually, they're hoping you'll leave.
Kind of, yeah, kind of. So
you can relax a bit.
Yeah, so patience, get engaged in the culture, enjoy your time when you're here, because it is a fantastic country. And yes, you'll be pushed and pulled from corporate office, most likely. One other piece of advice is don't fall into the trap of very quickly saying Japan is different to everywhere else.
How long do you reckon that lasts back at corporate headquarters?
It doesn't last long.
No.
It doesn't last long. And I think the longer...
I've tried that one. It didn't last long.
No. And, and again, that's part of, I think, the communication piece between yourself and how you... Because it is hard, right? It is hard to be sitting in the middle of three different expectations, including your own, right? So I think if you come to Japan with a book thinking that everything's going to be the way you think it's going to be, you're going to be pleasantly or pleasantly surprised, both good and bad.
What's some other advice you'd give them, apart from being patient?
Get engaged with, the culture itself. Japan is still Japan, and Tokyo is a wonderful city, but it can be very lonely if you certainly come here by yourself. Because culturally it is very different, and the way people go about doing things. So, again, a club like the Tokyo American Club, right, is a great way to, meet other people and hear about their experiences of what they've done in Japan. Your podcast, exactly. I mean, if I had have known, or I had had that opportunity when I was coming to Japan to know that I could have listened to these sorts of things, everybody has a different point of view and a different opinion, but you pick the eyes out of it and use what you think. And then funnily enough, when you're sitting in a situation, you go, I remember hearing that on a podcast, and this was something that somebody said might work. But again, I think there's a lot for people to learn about how Japan operates from a leadership perspective. Japan still has a lot to learn about how outside of Japan works. And be flexible, listen a lot, because there's a great wealth of, you look at some of the things of the way they operate in Japan. By far the best public transport system in the world, the most incredible logistics companies in the world.
Shinkansen's got some unbelievable record on minutes late over decades. It's just, I forget the number, but it's an astonishing number. It's so little. I mean, you go to, I'll pick on Italy, for example, and Australia too, the train systems there,
If the train even turns up.
Yeah, if the train even turns up, exactly. So you look at Japan, they got something travelling that speed, so many of them every day, and they're this minuscule degree of lateness across decades, it's like astonishing.
Again, I think Tokyo as an example, obviously you and I both lived in other parts of Japan. Tokyo is very different to the rest of Japan as well. But what I think is quite unique about Tokyo is that, we talk about these big cities around the world. Tokyo, Hong Kong, less nowadays, but certainly Tokyo. It's truly the only full Asian city that operates globally, where people are coming in and out for all different reasons. Hong Kong is sort of losing. Singapore, much, much smaller. Right, and so the diversity and the things that you can experience in Japan compared to other Asian countries, based on their timeline of experience of going overseas or trading overseas, there's nowhere like it. It's very unique. China is a different beast. Korea is a different beast, but the one that amazes me constantly is Japan. And there's good and bad in all of that. So when you come here, embrace it, engage it. Don't try and understand it all the time, because sometimes when you try and understand it, when you think you understand it, you get a completely different version, right? We're often surprised. So, but if you are coming to Japan, I think you should consider yourself incredibly lucky, because, there's people like you and I that have chosen to live here. There's a hurdle, right? We all go through that sort of 2-3 years, or do I want to stay? Do I want to stay? I've left Japan twice and can't wait to come back.
Right.
So that says something. That says something in itself. Yeah.
And if we think about, we've discussed leadership at length here, but is there anything I should have asked you about leading in Japan which I haven't? Anything we haven't covered?
I don't think so.
I think we've probably got through it. And what's your definition of leadership then?
Again, I think leadership, so my definition is that leaders don't need to be a person with a title. Okay. Right? I think leaders exist everywhere. And, there's plenty of stories and plenty of examples of what that is. I think leadership, to me, as my definition, is not about having all the answers. It's about engaging a team and drawing out the good things from all of that team, identifying what is their strengths, not trying to make them be good at everything. And sometimes people are better suited to doing a particular job. That can create a good leader. It could be the guy who's washing the dishes downstairs. So leadership is about, they have an ability to take people to another place. As simple as that.
Nice.
Yeah, simple as that.
Nice way to end too. So thank you very much.
Excellent
discussion today. Thank you. So please join us again for our next episode of Japan's top business interviews.